Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads.
Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle. Jamie Eads joining you as I do each and every week. This is episode 110. I hope everybody's having a fantastic week out there. Don't know what the weather's like in your neck of the woods, but fall has finally arrived here in the Bluegrass State. Just my favorite time of the year. Just love it. College football going on, albeit a little subdued. But everything's going well. We've got a great episode for you today. I'm going to take this opportunity right at the top to remind you again, if you're not a member over at the wonderful drum forum, ghostnote.net, I encourage you to go over there, sign up, hang out with us, talk about building drums, lots of humor. It's a good place to hang out. I stop in about every other day and, make some posts. So if you're not a member over there, I do encourage you to do so. As I mentioned, we have a great episode for you today. We're going to be joined by just a wonderful man, wonderful drummer making his home down in Nashville. Marc Pisapia is going to be my guest right after this message from our sponsor, Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos Drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. With operations in over 28 countries worldwide, thousands of drummers have already discovered the Los Cabos difference. Using FSC certified wood from Canada and the US, Los Cabos make the finest quality drumsticks, percussion tools, and accessories on the market. The best news, Los Cabos Drumsticks offers you a ton of choice. They have 22 individual drumstick models and 14 percussion tools, many of which are available in 3 different wood types: maple, white hickory, and red hickory. Red hickory comes from the center or heart of the hickory tree and has been independently proven to be both stronger and more elastic than white hickory without adding a lot of weight. While most drumstick manufacturers have shunned red hickory, Los Cabos Drumsticks has embraced it, becoming the only established stick brand in the world to offer a full line of red hickory drumsticks. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com. Follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, guys and girls, we're about to be joined by Marc Pisapia, who, as I mentioned, makes his home down in Nashville nowadays. Marc has spent quite a few years playing with Josh Rouse, but he has just a tremendous discography. He has done records with Chuck Prophet, with Dave Mead, Kelly Willis, K.D. Lang. He's played with just some amazing folks, and not only is he a great drummer, he's a really good singer as well. And, once again, I'm going to give thanks to the Minneapolis connection. We got this recommendation from our pal Dave Kirby to get Marc on the show. So very glad to have him on. So please help me welcome to the Drum Shuffle, Marc Pisapia. Hey, good morning, Marc. How's it going, brother?
Great. How are you doing, Jamie?
Man, I cannot complain. As we're recording this, we're still in the midst of, this coronavirus global pandemic. You are sitting in the Music City, Nashville, Tennessee, probably with not a lot to do. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, pretty much. Fortunately, I've been doing some tracks from home during the lockdown, so that's been good, keeping busy with that. But otherwise, not much else happening.
Yeah,
people are trying to storm the honky tonks downtown and trying to fight the city to perform, and it's a mess. But I understand people's frustrations and wanting to get out and play for sure. But I'm not sure that now is yet the right time.
Yeah, well, I mean, this conversation has been had amongst many musicians. We're all going to be the last folks to get back to work, whether it's a musician, an actor in a theater troupe, ballet companies. That's going to be, the last thing to come back, because, I understand you don't want to put 5,000 people in a room together. That doesn't seem smart to me, but I'm no scientist, so.
I know, me either, but it doesn't seem smart to me either.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know, in my area in central Kentucky, some of the clubs have been permitted to open back up at a limited capacity, 30% or something small. And, I don't know very many of my local musician friends that would want to book a gig where it's going to be limited to 30% of capacity, because,
right.
That's cutting into the pocketbook, obviously, for musicians. And everybody wants a packed crowd when they play.
Exactly. I know. It's a frustrating dilemma, because, we all want to play. It's part of what keeps us sane and healthy and moving forward. But, it's the diminishing returns of playing to small crowds and having to lug your stuff all across town to play a gig that's going to be less than exciting and, and less than profitable. But it's just it's better to stay home at this point and be safe, I think.
Yeah, it's not a good equation for us, but anyway, as is, kind of our tradition here on the Drum Shuffle, I do want to back up and kind of start at the beginning. You're originally a New Jersey native. Talk to us a little bit about your early years and how you got into music and drumming to begin with, if you don't mind.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so like you said, I'm from New Jersey originally. Basically, grew up in the armpit just across from Staten Island, and it was the 1970s, and everybody had a band in their garage, and, classic rock, which was not classic at that point, was king, and, and there was music everywhere. And, I can't say that our parents were very musical, but they bequeathed my brother and I with a box of really great 45s from their heyday, and we just devoured all of it, and then just started buying records from there. And we had older cousins who were very, they had great musical taste, and they were very encouraging, and would, our grandmother would buy us records at Christmas time. She had no idea what this, Pink Floyd record was, but she'd go to Sam Goody and grab it, and, my cousin would be like, oh, you need to check this out, And so, I basically started playing in bands when I was like 10. I was singing for my brother's band. He started playing guitar at an early age and was getting really, really good at it. And in grammar school, his last couple of years, he had a band with some friends, and I ended up singing for them. And then, I would get a little bit frustrated because the drummer, I could tell, was not like, he was missing some of the details on some of the parts that I wasn't a drummer per se, but I knew, I was like, that's not the intro to Spirit of Radio. It's different, And so when we'd finish rehearsing, those guys would go upstairs, and I would stick downstairs in the drum kit for like another hour by myself and just work these things out and trying to almost see if I could figure them out by myself and maybe clue him into what he was missing, but I don't think he caught on. And then, when I was in like, fourth grade, I wanted to take drum lessons. But my parents refused to buy me a drum set. That wasn't going to be part of the deal. And so I'd gotten a pair of sticks and practice pad, and was working out rudiments that my dad taught me. He was in the drum and bugle corps when he was younger, so he taught me a few rudiments, and I got started with that. And then I got kind of frustrated with it and moved on. And then I sang for another band later years in grammar school, and then when I was getting into high school, basically, our dad owned an Italian deli in the town next door to where we grew up. And we worked there, my brother and I, since, I started working when I was 12, basically, or even younger than that. But when I was 12, it was basically on, it was like just about every day, 5, 6 days a week, whatever. And so when I was going into high school, I really wanted to pick up the drums again. And mainly with the idea of like, well, my brother's getting really good, and I love the drums, and maybe we could be like the next Van Halen or something, So,
right,
which was huge for me at the time. And so, but again, my parents, I started taking lessons, and my parents were like, well, we're not going to buy you a drum set. And I was like, well, what's the point, and they're like, well, we're not going to buy you a drum set because you don't stick with anything. You quit before, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but this is different. I argued back and forth, and then finally I was just like, well, forget it. I'm just going to buy my own drum set. I'm working, I'll save up. And so, I was taking drum lessons with this guy for a while, and, we were doing rudiments and everything. And then he started to push towards, trying to sell me on the idea of buying a drum set, and probably largely because he was going to partake in a commission if sold, but I was like, okay, now it's time. So I saved up and bought this kit, and as soon as I bought it, I wasn't even prepared. I was like, wait, what do you mean? It doesn't come with a stool? It doesn't come with cymbals? I was so green,
Yeah.
But fortunately, my dad was there, and he was like, he coughed up for a stool and some hi-hats and got started. And then I went back to lessons, and the teacher was just kind of like, well, now it's just, you gotta sit on the kit and just kind of work your way around it and kind of learn the dynamics, learn how to play it, learn how to reach everything. And really it just takes repetition and sitting and learning songs. And he was like, I have students come in that want me to teach them songs, but that's not really what I'm here for, and this and that. And so with that, I just kind of was like, well, okay, so I guess I don't really need this anymore. And I quit lessons and started to just, practice on my own. And largely because, between work and school and everything else, I didn't really have time to be continuing with lessons. I do regret it later in life, but I just wanted to get up and get playing and get in a band. And I met these guys in high school early on who had a band, and they were picking around. Well, you play drums? Well, maybe you should come over and jam sometimes. I went over and jammed with them, and they were great. The one guitar player, just like, he could do everything Eddie Vedder could do at age 14. I mean, he was playing Eruption like it was nothing. And, and so I would go over to his house. It was a really sweet Puerto Rican family, like 3 generations living in the house. And we would sit up in their living room and make a racket for 5 or 6 hours in an afternoon. And this is before I even had my own drum kit. And then, right when I got my drum kit, they handed me a 90-minute cassette tape front and back full of like all this heavy metal that I really hadn't really, dove into at that point. I was into like the Police and Squeeze and Rush, and Pink Floyd or whatever. But now they're throwing Iron Maiden and Metallica,
nice.
Metallica at me and all this stuff. Yeah. So it was like, okay, well, I just ran the tape back and forth and learned everything, and that's kind of how I got started. And then we started playing, and we actually would compete against my brother's band at battles of the bands and whatnot. And we actually won against them, which was kind of a rip-off because they were a much better band than we were. But we were giving the people more of what they wanted. And, And so anyway, so from there, just kept playing, and then went to college. I actually didn't want to go to college. I wanted to try and convince my parents that I just wanted to go out and play. And they were like, well, you need to get an education first. And this and that. And I was like, all right, And so I went off to school in upstate New York. And after my freshman year, there really wasn't a music scene happening there at all. It was kind of a bummer. My brother, where he went to school in Pennsylvania, they had a really cool scene. It was a really small private school, but everybody, it was like a John Hughes movie every time I would go visit. I mean, it was like college radio central, and all these bands and everybody with asymmetrical haircuts and wearing paisley and smoking pipes, and and I got turned on to all this great music, REM, Psychedelic Furs, Cure, and when I was at my college, it was kind of little bit more meathead, you know?
Yeah.
But so I was home for break on Thanksgiving my sophomore year, and I was talking to my brother about it. I was like, maybe you should just bring your drums back to school. Maybe something will happen. You never know, something will happen. Kind of like if you build it, they will come. And so I packed everything up and drove back up to go back to school after the break. And as I was walking through the breezeway, this guy's like, hey, man, you play drums? I play bass. And it was this guy, James Haggerty, this guy Hags, who it ended up, we're still playing together 30 years later. He was like one of the first rhythm section partners I had growing up, and we've stuck with it for a long time. And it's been a very interesting and long enduring relationship. But so anyway, we did the band thing in college, and then I graduated. I almost chose not to graduate. So my brother had his band out in Pennsylvania was doing really well. They had their own, original music, and they were recording a lot, and they had a really cool scene. And they were kind of, they had a nice little buzz going in central Pennsylvania. And I was convinced that they were going to get signed, and I was going to miss the boat, and, he's going to be a huge star, and I'm going to be stuck in college. And right before my senior year, he called me and said that their drummer was leaving, and they wanted me to come join the band. And so it was like 2 weeks before school, and I was like stuck with the decision, like, do I finish college or do I go join his band or whatever? But I was like, man, I got too much invested in this. I got 1 year left. Let me just finish and see where we're at afterwards, And so, I did whatever, and then I moved back home after college for a little bit and started playing in some bands around New York City and stuff, and met some good friends that I'm still connected with today. And then somewhere along the line, about a year, little after, maybe like a little over a year after being home, my brother called and was like, he had left the whole band that he was in and wanted to record a record of his own, and asked me to join him. And so we got together and we worked out these parts in the basement, and then went out to his friend's house in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, who had his own like little home studio, and we cut this record there. And it was really adventurous. He hired a local, like there's one guy in town that played pedal steel, and he was a luthier and kind of a conservative older guy, but and we threw all this stuff at him. The music was kind of like, it was kind of all over the place, very Beatley, but very also some big star influence and stuff, and so we made this record with all these weird pedal steel parts that this guy played that, he didn't really know what we were going for, but his parts were excellent, and we kind of stumbled upon this sound, and a friend that we were working with on the side recommended we send a copy to his friend, who's a music critic and journalist down in Memphis, this guy named Rick Clark. And not long after, we got a call from him. He really loved his stuff. We started having long conversations with him. And then my brother was like, well, let's go down and meet this guy. Let's take a trip down to Tennessee. And so on the way to Memphis, he was in Nashville on business. We stopped in Nashville and hung out here a couple days. And we were staying with his friend George Bradley, this guy from Memphis, who's he's called the Tone Chaperone. He's like a genius musician with two of every of the best amps, guitars, basses, like everything you could want. His house smelled like transistors and tubes. And we stayed there a couple of days and just kind of fell in love with the town. Nashville is a strange vortex because, it wasn't really on my radar it wouldn't have necessarily been on my radar at that time to necessarily visit if I took a cross-country trip. No disrespect. We didn't really grow up with a lot of country music by any means. We only got the dribble-down crossover stuff, Islands in the Stream and the Gambler and whatever. And so, but we just fell in love with Nashville and decided, pretty quickly, like, let's just move down there, And so within a couple months, we packed everything up and just moved down.
Yeah, not to interrupt, but what time period is this? Is this early 90s or?
Yeah, it was 93.
Okay. Because, when you said, pedal steel and we kind of stumbled upon this sound, I mean, that was kind of when, Americana music or the no depression movement was kind of, surging into, I guess the collective conscience, of the country. You had bands like, Uncle Tupelo had just split up, and Jay Farrar formed Sunvolt, and Jeff Tweedy went on to form Wilco, and so when you said that, I thought, man, this is probably right about the same time.
Exactly. And we weren't really, at the time, that stuff really wasn't on our radar just yet. We were just, my brother just had this thing. It was like, he had a sound that he wanted to hear, and it was it was basically what has become Americana. It was like, and I think it's just the zeitgeist of the time. Like he just was tapped into what was coming next. We lucked out getting in on the front door of that, but still, his music was different enough that it wasn't really. Nobody could really categorize it. It was like, and Americana hadn't really been defined as such at that point,
Right,
so
right.
It was like, people didn't know what to make of it. It's like, well, it's not country, it's not pop, it's not, it's not hip hop, it's not rock.
Right. It's nothing, right?
Yeah. But it was interesting being on that curve too, though, like you said.
Yeah, well, and you also mentioned Big Star, which, I mean, when I talk to somebody that's a non-musician and I mention Big Star, they're like, who? You know what I'm saying? It's like the general public has no idea who that is, but every musician goes, oh my God, that record is so amazing. And I lived in Memphis, for a couple of years, right after high school. And, that was the thing that everybody wanted to replicate at that time in the mid 90s. If you were in Memphis, it was like the lore of Big Star, right?
Absolutely.
You wanted to do that record. And, I think it really, everybody aspiring to that really created the Americana movement, but I guess that conversation is for a different day, but, being on the front end of that, and obviously you've made quite a career playing Americana music. So, not to interrupt your story, but I wanted to give a little context around that.
Sure. Appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, that stuff was all that music, the Big Star and, NRBQ, all these underrated, really musical bands that, kind of, kept the Beatle tradition, but took it in a more American direction, and put a stamp on it that was so unique that, like, it's unfortunate that it never got its proper respect or notability,
Yeah.
But at the same time, the unadulterated quality of it is what is so gravitational toward it. It just pulls you right in because it's not like anything that you expect it to be, and that's really where we were coming from, and in all honesty, like, all the bands that I've ever really liked the most were the ones that kind of carved their own path, whether it was with huge success or pop stuff or without it. I just liked the bands that had their own little insular universe, that no matter what anybody else was doing, they were going to do their thing. I was a big Rush fan, as most drummers probably are.
Yeah.
And then REM and Smiths and The Cure. I mean, all these bands that just created their own universe. I mean, even now, I do some playing with a great, amazing guitar player named Reeves Gabrels, who, was in Tin Machine with David Bowie, but now he's in The Cure as the lead guitar player. And, so I've gotten to go to a few shows and hang out with them. And it's amazing seeing these guys, 30 or 40 years later, still, like, 2.5 hours of just every song. Them, whether or not you had the albums or whether or not, you were proxy to that music, and anyway, that's a whole sidebar, but.
Well, I mean, yes. I will say this, my wife, whom I've been married to for 20 years, I would say The Cure is probably her all-time favorite band. And,
nice.
When I first met her, of course I was, I knew who The Cure was, but I was like, well, that's that weird guy that wears black lipstick, and I mean, that's kind of the only thing I knew, I knew their music, but being, kind of immersed into that through my wife, I was like, Robert Smith is a genius. I mean, that guy, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this, right? I mean, he just nailed down to the floor. This is what we're about. And like you said, you may not know it's a Cure song, but when it comes on, you're like, oh, wow, I know this song. This is a great song. I mean, the guy just, I don't know, it just flows out of him. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, totally. And even today, I mean, it's just like, he's still such a great singer and great musician and just a sweet, really approachable person, which I wouldn't have expected.
Well, yeah. I mean, you would think that he would be a little bit prickly, but, I've always heard the same thing, that he's just one of the most gracious, kind human beings alive.
Yeah, totally. And the cool thing is just knowing a little bit of the inside of that whole operation. It's such a really, democratic run organization, and everybody's so well taken care of. There's so little ego or hierarchy, inside the operation. To me, it's the ultimate success,
That's good to hear.
To be able to have that kind of success and be, with or without, the machine at your side at all times,
Yeah, for sure. Well, so, after you're, falling in love with Nashville, to kind of go back to that story, I know that you still work with your brother, and, I caught a video recently of you guys singing together. It wasn't even a video of you playing drums. It was you and your brother singing together. And,
wow, cool.
You can always, at least I can always tell in harmony singing when somebody is related. I don't know what it is, but there's something about the harmonizing with a sibling or a cousin, or you can always tell when folks have grown up together.
Yeah, there's something, there really is something to the genetic harmony that is so valuable, and, it's special, and the thing is, like, so to sort of, meander about really quickly, we ended up doing our first record. The record we did in Pennsylvania never really got released. It just became something that we passed around to friends and used to get gigs and tried to get some promotion, whatever. But Rick Clark ended up producing our first record that we released, and we did it with him at Ardent, which was a huge,
Great studio.
Yeah, I mean, that was literally my second. Well, it was my second time in a proper studio recording, and the fact that it was Ardent, we did half the record in the A room and half the record in the C room, and it was mind blowing, it was such an amazing experience, and Jody Stevens was there, and he would pop in, because he was, he runs a lot of the stuff out of the studio, and he was running the label at the time, and it was such a huge mind blowing experience. But we did half the record, and I didn't sing on anything. And then, somewhere between, we took a break between cutting the second half, and my brother and I started doing these little these little acoustic songwriter things, and I started just throwing in some harmonies. And then Rick was like, you got a really good voice. You guys should figure out how to use this, let's figure out how to capitalize on this. So I ended up singing on the second half of the record, and it was such a joy for me, because that was always something that I always really wanted to be part of, the singing, and that's how I started out, was singing lead for bands, so being able to have that and develop that through the years has been such a privilege and such a treat. And even now at our age, it's like whenever we get the opportunity to do it, it's just such a soulful, beautiful experience, with or without any audience or any kind of reaction or response, just the vibration of doing it is,
Well, and, having good chops as a singing drummer, that casts a whole lot wider net, for potential gigs. I mean, if you're out touring with a band and it's, I'm putting together a 4-piece band, having a drummer that can sing good harmonies, wow, that puts you on a short list, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely helped for sure. And, and anything you can do to make yourself even more valuable is a plus, and singing is definitely a plus, I mean, when I do gigs with other artists, it's not something that I offer up immediately unless they ask, because it's usually like, hey, we're going to have one rehearsal and then do this gig. And so, the vocals to me at that point are secondary. It's like my main focus is I got to make sure the drums are correct, but once we're inside of it, if they say, hey, do you want to sing? I was like, yeah, sure. But, as long as I have the drums mapped out and,
yeah, well, sure.
I know what I'm doing there, then it's like, sure, let's have at it,
Yeah. Well, and, you mentioned some other artists, and I know we're jumping around all over the place, and I apologize for that. But
no.
This is such a great conversation. I want to make sure that I get some of this stuff in here. When I was looking through your discography, as I mentioned to you, I didn't think I was familiar with your career or your playing, but as I looked through the discography, I was like, oh yeah, I've definitely heard Marc's playing a bunch of times. Kelly Willis, Katie Lang, Chuck Prophet, I saw in there. Did I see Dave Mead maybe?
Yep. Mead.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've played with a lot of, shall we say, name brand artists. That's got to be pretty amazing. I mean, did you pinch yourself at all when you were like, man, I'm playing with Katie Lang? I mean, seriously.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that
was huge.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, Chuck Prophet, I mean, come on, man. I mean, that's pretty legendary stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. And it's just, Chuck is such a great person. We're still great buds to this day. In fact, we just, before the lockdown, in January, we had just done a tour together. I wasn't playing with him, but I played with an artist named Josh Rouse. He's another one that I've done probably most of my work touring and recording with Josh Rouse through the last 18 years.
Okay.
And in fact, that's kind of what led to the Chuck thing. I kind of can't remember exactly, but a producer friend of mine that I did a lot of work with, Roger Moutino, called me in to come do some stuff on Chuck's record, and we just hit it off. And then we started visiting. If I was in San Francisco, we'd visit, or if he was in town, we'd get together. And then the Kelly Willis record came about because he produced that record and invited me to come down to Austin to play on it, which was a great experience. Yeah. And then the Katie Lang thing, so, my brother and I were huge Katie Lang fans. In fact, I was just telling somebody recently, when we first moved here and we weren't doing much, I would sit in the afternoons and draw and just kind of listen to music and just kind of meditate, whatever. And I had drawn the Katie Lang Shadowland cover in a sketchbook of mine, and it's and then whatever, cut to 20 years later, my brother, he had been working with, he worked with a band called Guster for a long time, and the front of house sound guy for that band was working with Katie Lang and passed my brother's music on to her. And they started having, chats and whatever, and then she was like, well, I want to come to Nashville and just throw something down. And he had just built his studio. It was nothing had happened in there yet. And he called me up and was like, hey, man, can you come do this session with Katie Lang in a couple days? I'm like, yeah.
No, I'm busy that day. I'm going to Home Depot to get some plants for the backyard. Sorry.
Well, the funny thing was I was in the middle of a major kitchen remodel at this house that my ex had.
No way.
It had been months, and I didn't even really touch drums, and I was like, oh man, I gotta snap out of this and get into drum mode quickly, And yeah, it was definitely a trip because his studio has it's kind of like a long building with a big high ceiling cutting room in the middle, and then flanked by two lofts on either side. And on the one side, the loft has the vocal booth in it with a big glass window facing out into the room. And so literally she was bird's eye view over my shoulder the entire time, and I could feel her stare. And it was just from the minute we started recording and just hearing her voice come through, on every take, it was just like, it was giving me chills, It was like, it was amazing. But
yeah,
it was a real treat to do that.
For sure. I mean, I think most drummers, I mean, I can only speak for myself, so I'm not going to say most drummers. I'm going to say this drummer.
Okay.
I would be thrilled to have any one of those opportunities. I mean, I would be like, well, I can die satisfied now. I played with Chuck, or I played with Kelly Willis, or I played with Katie Lang. When you start adding all those things together, I can only imagine that, that's something to really hang your hat on, so to speak, and having one of those opportunities probably leads to another, as you kind of explained. But having these things on your resume can't hurt.
No, it doesn't.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, but I mean, if you and I were both looking at the same gig, we're both eyeballing it, I don't have Chuck on my resume. I don't have Katie Lang on my resume. As soon as you say that, everybody goes, well, if it's good enough for Katie Lang, this guy passes the smell test. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. And and yet at the same time, being here in Nashville, it's like, that's just any old story,
I mean, I've made the joke, I don't know how many times, if you go into, an Applebee's in Nashville and order a cheeseburger, the guy that brings it to your table is probably the greatest guitar player you've never heard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and that was one of the things that struck us immediately when we got here, being around the New York music scene and stuff, it was great. A lot of rock and roll, a lot of punk rock, a lot of edgy stuff, a lot of freaky stuff, But like the first few nights that we went out in town, it's just like, some of the music wasn't necessarily my style or my preference, but the players, the musicianship was just amazing, And I remember very early on, I thought like, all right, every time I go out, I have to pay attention because every it's a lesson.
Yeah.
Every time, and also just like, if this is the pool that you're walking into, you have to be at that level stepping in,
Yeah.
And that's a big, like a psychological jump, But the music scene here is so supportive and so friendly, and in general, and so I don't know, just amicable that you feel part of something rather than you're fighting against it.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the cool things about Nashville is, if you have that network, it's like, well, I can't do the gig, but my buddy Mark might be available. That stuff happens all the time down there. And,
exactly.
And, I guess a lot of people, when you talk about the Nashville music scene, of course, they just automatically think of Lower Broadway or whatever, the bar bands and all that stuff.
Right.
And, not to put too fine a point on it, but any one of those bars that you walk into, it's going to be a very polished, band that you're seeing. Everybody is an A player that plays those gigs. And, case in point, I was in Nashville on business a few years ago, and on a Monday night, I just kind of wobbled into Robert's Western World, and the guy playing drums in that band that night was Willie Cantu from Buck Owens and the Buckaroos. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, holy cow, man. I mean, it's just like everybody is a royalty level player everywhere you go.
Amen. And also like just even take that for example, it's like, there's a certain sort of like egoless blue collar mentality about music where it's like, these people have done amazing things, and yet they still want to go out and play a bar gig for 2.5 hours or whatever it is,
Yeah,
just
man.
because they want to play and they want to be in the mix and they love it,
Yeah. I mean, guys, when they come home from their tour, they can only sit around for, 3 or 4 days. I just did 200 days straight with, I don't know, Toby Keith or Travis Tritt or whatever the case may be. After 2 or 3 days, you'll see those guys filtering into the bars to sit in because, like you said, man, they just want to play.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just such a great hang, I mean, I'm fortunate. I play in a we haven't really done it in a little while, kind of take a break, but we have this band called the Sons of Zevon, and it started as like, a bunch of friends in the neighborhood just wanting to kind of. There was a friend of ours on a venue called the Family Wash, and at the original place it was really small, small stage, but it was just like where everybody hung out when they were off the road, and just tell stories and regale each other with road stories and studio stories, and out of that all these different projects popped up, and one of them was this thing called Sons of Zevon, which had nothing to. It started originally. They started doing Warren Zevon covers, and and then it morphed into we would basically take, we would start with a year like 1970 and take 25 of a wide variety of stuff from that chart from that year and learn them and do those, and do a night, 1970, and then the next time it would be 71. And we did it all the way through the decade of the 70s, and we realized like that's pretty much as far as we want to go. There's nothing in the 80s that would be suitable for the band. But anyway, but the point was, and Fred Eltringham, another great Nashville drummer who I know you've interviewed, he was the original drummer, but he was so busy that, and I got called in to play percussion with them on the side when we would do it, and then he got so busy that I ended up taking the seat, but just to be able to play with these players and singers, I mean, like Peter Frampton sat in with us one night, and the same night, blank on his name, but but just like the amount of musicianship on stage and the willingness to just have a good time, to perform, just have fun playing songs. It's just such a great opportunity and great memories and great experiences, and that's what you get in Nashville,
Yeah.
Mark Ford, that was the other one.
Oh yeah, man. Black Crowes, and I mean, what an amazing musician that guy is.
I know. Wait, I'm confused. I'm sorry. Not Mark Ford. Robin Ford. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I was getting ready to say. Ford. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's like the same night, Robin Ford and your boy. It was just like mind blowing, But
yeah. Wow. I mean, it just. I guess being there all the time. I guess if you're not ready, you were talking about that psychological step. I can only surmise that if you're not ready for that, it can be pretty dejecting, and like, wow, I'm never going to get a gig, if you're not ready for that level of competition. But, I'm curious, when, the end of the world is over, what's next? I mean, what do you have coming up, or have you been able to make any plans for the rest of the year and into the future? I mean, are you continuing, to work with the same, artists that you've been working with? Are you branching out? What's on the horizon for you?
Well, at the moment, it's pretty wide open. I was supposed to do some touring with Josh Rouse in April. That got canceled, obviously, and then it was going to be rescheduled for September or October, but I'm pretty sure that's canceled again. And at the moment, I have one gig on the books in December. I told the guy, like, get me the tunes immediately. Like, I got to learn them now, but yeah, so, I mean, everything is pretty much at a standstill, and, I'm just kind of holding out, waiting to see what comes next. I'm talking to my brother. We're talking about doing some remote recording with each other, and maybe even doing a distance concert from his backyard, or just trying to figure out ways to keep busy in the interim, and see what comes down the pike.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a strange time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just so bizarre because you can't make any plans. You know, I mean, it's just kind of like the world for musicians stopped. I mean, you know, obviously for me, you know, no gigs. I've been doing a little bit of studio stuff, but even that's different and weird. It's, you know, there's no live cutting happening on the studio floor. You know, it's, hey, I need you to come in and play along to this, you know, scratch acoustic track with a click, and then I'll have the drums, and then we'll get, you know, the bass player in and he'll put his part down. So it's a little bit different, you know, in that when you even go to the studio, it's you and an engineer. There's nobody else there.
Right.
You know, so I mean, it's just weird, you know.
It's definitely weird. Yeah. And, you know, like, you know, right before lockdown, we were getting ready to do a month-long residency with a really great Americana artist from Nashville, this guy named Brian Wright. And he was just, you know, in the middle of putting out his record, and we were going to play every Thursday night at this cool bar up here in Madison called D's. It's got a really hip following, a cool place. And then we got hit with a tornado. The first gig of that series turned into a tornado relief benefit, you know, and he ended up, it became like a multi-band, you know, multi-performer night. He kind of donated the night for everybody to get up and do some stuff for this benefit. And then, you know, and then after that, it was like, that was it. It was like we went into lockdown, and I just feel sorry for people like him or other people who are just in the middle of putting something out or just getting something going, and then having to, like, you know, get pushed back again. You know, it's just, it's really frustrating, you know. I mean, and everybody, you know, it's for everybody. You know, It's like, I feel sorry for the younger drummers who were just about to get their break, who were just about to leave for a tour, who were just about to do a studio thing that got canceled. You know, it's like, I feel sorry for the young songwriters or singers who were just about to get a cut that didn't happen, obviously. I mean, it's not so much. It's not so important for myself at this point because I'm already past the point of it being an issue. But youth is part of the game in the business, you know. And so for every minute that you're not doing it is a minute lost in your career, you know. And so, well, I feel sorry for the younger people for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I started going gray at a very early age, and I remember in one particular situation where I had done some demos with a young, promising artist who's doing great things now, but part of that management team was like, do you think the drummer would dye his hair? And I was just like, no. No gig is worth a box of Just for Men for me. I mean, I don't know, but you're right. I mean, that youth is, you got to build those early years. You've got to start building a career to get it snowballing because, I understand, as a mid 40s guy, I'm not going to get my first tour now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you never know, but I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, and that's okay because, I've got a mortgage and, a car payment and, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But
totally.
I just think if it comes down to, a 45-year-old guy or a 25-year-old guy, most artists are going to pick the 25-year-old guy if everything else is equal. That's just my opinion. I don't have any empirical data to back it up, but that is a very important point that you made. The younger artists that were just kind of getting some momentum going, that has all halted now for them.
Yeah. I mean, imagine, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I know you can imagine it, but it's just like the crusher of like, well, now you're going to have to wait pretty much like a year before you can really get back, if we can get back to what we thought it was going to be. And then who knows what the system's going to look like? Who knows what venues are going to be left? Who knows what, I mean, it's frustrating,
Yeah.
But the thing is, about music too, though, like, like one of the things that kind of, if I can digress for just a minute, it's like from my personal experience, like, I look at things and have fortunately, since I was in my 20s, from kind of the Joseph Campbellian sense of like, if you're paying attention, life will kind of take you on a ride, take you on a journey, and for me, the drums and music was an invitation into a whole other world, a whole other way of living that was something that, I couldn't have dreamed of as a kid, like I didn't know anybody in the music business growing up. There was one guy across the street from my dad's deli who he ran his dad's liquor store, and back in the 70s he had a prog rock band that toured Japan and put a record out and had a little bit of success. And my dad would be like, you need to talk to him, and you'd go to talk to him, and it'd just be the most depressing conversation you ever had. Of course. And so, but once you make the decision to kind of get into it, it kind of takes you, and it's all the other stuff that happens on the side. It's everything else on the journey that's important, It's like the John Lennon thing, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. It's like, all the things, like my brother and I, when we had our band, we thought we were going to, get this big record deal. We had big, there's people talking about bidding wars and all this stuff, and we were so sure we're going to be, we're going to be the next big thing, and and of course that doesn't happen, and but by proxy, by being in the mix, by being in it, and that the music has taken that journey step, it's like then all of a sudden things start to splinter off. It's like, hey man, you've been able to do this, and you find yourself just being guided to the next thing, and somehow, that becomes the constant that carries you through, and there are other people in town with way more success than I'll ever know, and there's other people in town who may never get to scratch the surface, and I'm just grateful that I've been able to be a part of it and still be in the mix, and that music is still part of my life, even at this point,
Yeah. Well, man, that's such a great point. I remember, coming through my career, the band that almost made it, right? I mean, everybody's got one of those stories,
Totally.
We thought, all we need to do is get a record deal and then our problems will be over. And that never really happened for us. And now I thank God every day that it didn't, because that's
absolutely,
that's typically when the problems start, is when you owe somebody else money.
Totally.
And at that time, we were 21, 22-year-old kids. Had they sent us to Europe on a, 8-week tour, somebody may have come home in a box. I mean, we were just out of control. You know what I mean? So
sure.
But those life experiences, the more you can add those up, the more grateful you become for every opportunity. And I think that's exactly what you just said.
I think, yeah, exactly.
So,
I mean, look at your, I don't know terribly much about your detailed story, but, look at what it's opened up for you, this podcast, and, you're providing a service to people. And that's something that came out of your journey, that's a byproduct of being in this mix,
Yeah. Well, I mean, had you, held a gun to my head when I was 21 years old or however old, whatever age, and said, hey, you're going to have Peter Erskine on a podcast and you're going to be hosting Peter Erskine or Bill Stewart or Marco Miniman or any of those huge names, Fred
Sure.
Eltringham, Matt Chamberlain. But, the list goes on and on. I would have said you were nuts. You know what I mean? It's like those guys don't have time for me. But this is just part of my journey, and we're all in this journey together. And that's one of the cool things about the drumming community, not to beat a dead horse, but, and I'm not pointing fingers at, guitarists or piano players, but drummers have this, really fraternal thing about us. Like, I sent you an email and said, hey man, I would love to interview you for this podcast. The response, absolutely. When do we do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just think our community is all about helping one another. And there's not that same cutthroat mentality of, well, I've got to screw Mark over so that I can have an angle on this gig. We just don't do that.
Totally. Well, and even in a weird, symbolic sense, the drummers being sort of the shaman or the timekeepers. It's like we're more service oriented than the rest of the people in the band. It's like everybody else can have a more personal agenda, but the drummer has to play for everybody else. It's not just for your own self. And in a way, I think that's what you're talking about. That's what brings that brotherhood. I mean, it's like rhythm is something innate, and yet those who tap into it kind of, I don't know, there's a spiritual thing to it, that I don't know. Maybe I'm just riffing on.
No, man, I think I can't put it into words either, but I can count on one hand the drummers that I've met that I thought, man, that guy's a jerk or that girl's a jerk. You know what I mean? It's very few and far between. Most of the time,
totally.
We're very giving of our time because, in a sense, that's what we do every day. We're giving time to other musicians,
That's right.
So I don't know, but I think you're onto something there. And look, man, this has been just a fantastic conversation, and I would love to have you back sometime because, I think we could, delve into 37 other topics and go for an hour. But, as is the tradition, you've already offered up a ton of great advice, but, we always ask all our guests for a good piece of advice. What would you put out there into the universe for other drummers?
Well, it's pretty cliche, but I think the most important thing is to just, to pay attention to what's actually happening, to pay attention to the moment. Whatever the song is, whatever's happening, be the right part for that, and no more, and no less. Like no matter how much chops you have, no matter how much gospel chops you can show off, that's not really what it's about, unless it is about that, But in the most part, it's finding a way to support what is happening in the moment, whatever music is at hand. So figure out the best way to be able to adapt to all the situations that get thrown at you, to figure out the right approach in the situation. Yeah. I just did one of the remote sessions I just did, I ran into something that really kind of confused me because, I've spent a long time trying to figure out, to really kind of be about economy, take out all the stuff that's not needed, and this is a lifetime of work, just trying, well, that doesn't need to be there. That beat doesn't need to be there. That hit doesn't need to be there. Take that out, and try to just get to the essence of it, leave space. And so I was doing the session and the artist asked me for more cymbal crashes, like almost at just about every downbeat. And I was like, really? Because this goes against my entire philosophy. And yet, but if this is what you want, I'll give it to you, Yeah. And so I would just say, just pay attention to what's at hand and try to, like a method actor, bring what's needed for that moment,
Yeah, man, that's really good advice. And, to use an analogy from your career, you grew up listening to Neil and Rush. You probably weren't pulling out, the intro of Spirit to Radio on the Kelly Willis sessions or the Katie Lang sessions. That's not going to fit here, right? That's the same thing.
Totally. And I've known guys who just, I don't know, they couldn't get that. They couldn't get past that, they'd be putting in 30-second notes in an Americana song, and it's just like, no, that's not, the party shuffle doesn't work against that. There's no need to go there. It's just, it's not about showing what you can do. It's about doing what you can to support what is at hand. It's like you can show what you can do on a different gig, on a jazz gig or whatever. But it's like whatever the moment is, that's what you're needed for.
Yeah. Well, for me, the epiphany came in my 30s, and I can't even remember exactly where I was, but I just remember the thought coming into my frontal lobe that, man, it's not about the notes I'm playing. It's about the notes I'm not playing, you know?
Absolutely.
And when that, sunk in, like my phone got a whole lot busier for sessions. I mean, it's just, if you can rein it in and support the artist and the song, man, you're going to work a whole lot more. So that's some great advice, Mark. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Yeah, man. So, well, listen, real quick before we let you go, if folks out there are wanting to connect with you, where, all your socials, how can people, follow you and get in touch if they have questions?
Yeah, so unfortunately my website is a mess, and I feel even guiltier about it because I was a web designer for a few years on the side as well. But
does any drummer really have a great website? I mean, I know I struggle with it. So, I mean, I'm not going to blame you for that.
Yeah, and it was, I had one built, and then I got like, it's like, this just seems like too much, and I was going to strip it down and make it simpler. And at the time, it was like this rush for, all these drummers to like really over promote themselves, and I just didn't want to be that. There was something cringy about that, and I just let it go. But so anyway, the easiest way for anybody is Facebook, Marc Pisapia. It's Mark with a C. Or Instagram, mark.pisapia. And I am on LinkedIn, but again, terrible. My bio is ancient at this point, and there's I haven't kept up with keeping that up. But yeah, I'm on the traditional socials for sure, and that's probably the best way for anybody to reach me.
Fantastic. Well, again, man, thank you so much for such a great hang, and we'll have you back anytime. So, when, as I said, when the end of the world is over, and you're, back out there working and you got some new stuff going, drop me a note, let me know, and we'll have you back.
I'd love that. Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome, brother. Hey, man, thanks so much for your time, and we'll talk to you real soon, Mark.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Jamie. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure only. So thanks. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, man.
All right, bye. All right, everybody. That's going to wrap up episode 110 of the Drum Shuffle. Thank you guys and girls so much for tuning in. We simply can't do this show without each and every one of you listening and streaming and downloading our show every single week. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Hey, as always, I'm going to ask you, hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you use to listen to the Drum Shuffle podcast. We really, really appreciate it when you do that. And we have so many great guests coming up here over the next few weeks. You're not going to want to miss those. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Harry Myrie. Harry is just a phenomenal drummer and has a great YouTube channel. I think I'm safe in saying that Harry doesn't take himself too seriously. He is super funny. So if you're not familiar with Harry, check out his YouTube channel. He's got some great stuff, a day in the life of a session musician, a day in the life of a touring musician. And it's kind of a funny take on how he makes his living as a professional drummer. It's really good stuff. So check that out. He's going to be joining us next week for what I think was just a fantastic interview. Many thanks to Marc Pisapia for being our guest today. In 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be joined by Danny Gottlieb, who's just another legendary drummer. We've just got so many cool things coming up. I don't want you to miss any of those. As always, we answer every single email we get here. Our email address is thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Send us an email. We will respond. Give us some suggestions for folks that we should have as a guest. Tell us what you love about the show. Heck, tell me what sucks about the show. I get so much great feedback from all of you. I welcome it. Send us an email and we will get back to you. Of course, our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can always find more information about me over at jamieeads.com. Everybody have a great week out there, and until next time, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.